In today's session, we will talk about these concepts. Okay, the roles concept in Fusion applications and the user management. The third one is functional setup manager. We'll go through these three concepts one by one. The first one is roles concept. So, the roles concept basically in the Fusion we call as role-based access control. So simply you can call it as RBAC. Okay, role-based access control. So before we get into this Fusion related roles, just we'll try to understand the similar concept how we have in the EBS. It can be 11A or release 12. In case of EBS, what we have, just we have menus, right? We have menu. Within the menu we'll have a submenu. As a part of submenu we'll have a functions. To access to any menu or submenu or function, okay, to access to menu or submenu or function, what we have to do is directly we cannot have any access in the EBS environment. Only the possibilities you have to create the responsibility. Without creating the responsibility, we cannot have access to any menu or submenu or functions. Okay, fine. We create a responsibility. Say for example, we create a responsibility for accounts payables, maybe just by mapping main menu or submenu or some just customize some menu which, by grouping few functions, whatever. So we create a responsibility. So after creating the responsibility, can we record the business transactions? No. When you talk about responsibility, if you take example of payables responsibility, you should assign the primary ledger and operating in it to responsibility, then only you'll be able to have a access. That means primarily when we talk about payables responsibility, here I'll take combination of say, so AP responsibility. If responsibility is AP responsibility, to this we have to assign, okay, to this we have to assign primary ledger and operating it. Otherwise, even you may have responsibility which will allow you to access specific functions, but if you don't assign this primary ledger and operating it to specific responsibility, you cannot record the business transaction. So finally this responsibility, so here I'm taking AP, anyone you can take. Finally this responsibility you have to assign to user. Okay, this is the process we follow in case of EBS. We have a menu, and for menu we have, I mean, within the menu we can have a submenus and functions. And when you create the responsibility, okay, 1 second here. When you create the responsibility, okay, the responsibility you can create on main menu or submenu or functions. And finally, if the responsibility, if we take the case as AP responsibility, to AP responsibility we have to assign primary ledger and operating it. If you create GL responsibility, you have to assign the minimum primary ledger so that you will be able to use the GL application. And finally, that responsibility will be assigning to user. And to assign this primary ledger or operating into responsibility, what we do, we'll use profile options. By using the profile options, we can assign the primary ledger or operating into responsibility. This is how we are just managing in EBS environment. It can be 11A or release 12. In case of 11A, we know in the place of primary ledger we have SOB setup books. Okay, done. Now in fusion point of view, in fusion case, these, okay, for all these there is separate naming convention. In fusion, okay, what is the naming convention we'll discuss here. Okay, this is as per EBS. As per EBS, this is how we are managing when we talk about fusion. In fusion environment, what we are doing is basically that here everything will be dealing in the fusion with the concept called as roles. Okay, role based. Majorly in fusion we have basically four type of roles. Those are job roles, duty roles, and data roles, and abstract roles. Okay, to have access to specific function, okay, for any task or any functionality or any future fusion, we have basically four type of roles: job roles, duty roles, data roles, and abstract roles. But we know very well about EBS, and it won't be any challenge to understand fusion how these are mapped with respect to EBS. Okay, so already we discussed. We have in EBS menu, submenu, function, responsibility. So to responsibility are assigning the primary ledgers and operating it by using the profile options, and finally responsibility are assigning to user so that user can have access to responsibility, so that user can have some access to relevant functions, and whatever the primary ledger or operating it is assigned to the responsibility. With the help of the primary ledger or operating it, user will be able to record the transactions through specific functions which are available within the responsibility. So that is the logic we are just following in EBS. But coming to fusion, what does it mean by job role? It's a very simple. So we know menus. In EBS, Oracle is providing some seeded menus. In the similar way, the Fusion Oracle is providing seeded job roles. If you want to understand what is exactly job role in Fusion, the Fusion job role is equal to EBS menu. That's it. Okay, EBS menu. Here, menu name I am taking example as in EBS. So AP navigate GUI12. Okay, for menu example here I'm taking. So this in Fusion, instead of giving for payables AP navigate GUI job role they given, okay, a name, job role name they given as a say payables manager. For payables seeded menu name you can see in EBS as AP navigate GUI. A similar way in Fusion for payables you can see the job role called as payables manager, which is equal to AP navigate GUI. So in the same way, there are multiple job roles they given for each and every application. We'll see that detail level. So simple point is in Fusion job roles are equal to menus as per EBS. EBS menus are equal to Fusion job roles. And here we have in EBS submenus. Okay, equal to submenus we have, okay, duty roles here. Duty roles are equal to submenus. If you take here submenu called as AP invoices. Maybe you can take here submenu name as AP invoices. Here in Fusion duty role example you can take as payables invoice duty. Okay, payables invoice duty. Okay, this is how we can understand. So in EBS we have a functions. Yes, in within the duty role here also will be having the functions. Okay, for that we don't have any separate role name. So EBS, however, we will be having function is equal to, okay, some future. Those futures anyway will be part of submenu only. Here also, here submenu is equal to duty role. Within the duty role will be having the functions or futures. And what is our data roles? What is the data role in the fusion? See here, we'll create the responsibility. Okay, we'll create the responsibility by just selecting the data group, menu and request group. But now here we are not focusing on data group and request group. We are talking about only menu. So within the responsibility we'll be having the menu. Okay, because directly we cannot have access to menu in EBS. That is only possible through responsibility. So that is the reason we are creating the responsibility to have access to specific menu. Okay, I created responsibility. Just I created responsibility. Can we use that responsibility? No, we cannot use the responsibility for any business transactions until unless we assign the primary ledger or operating net when you talk about financial point of view. That means just responsibility. If you have just responsibility without assigning the primary ledger, there won't be any use. So this responsibility you cannot use, but here this responsibility you can use, whatever we discussed here. We have AP responsibility. To AP responsibility we assign the primary ledger and operating net. This combination, responsibility and primary ledger or operating combination, you can use, okay, to record the business transactions. The similar way here, what is a data role? Okay, data role is nothing but, okay, as per EBS, this you can map that. Okay, as per EBS, data role is equal to what? Responsibility. Okay, that's where already we assign primary ledger and operating, or else only primary ledger. This is what we call. As per fusion, if you want to understand as per fusion, if you take example payables manager as a job role, payables manager. Okay, here in EBS we are calling as AP Navigate Geo as a menu name. That in Fusion you can see as a role name as payables manager. This payables manager need access to which operating unit? Here in Fusion we are calling as business unit. So say for example India business unit. Okay, that means here we are talking about role plus operating unit, or else particular role plus primary ledger. If you take example of GL role plus primary ledger. Primary ledger is enough to work on the GL application to have access to functions, okay, to record the transaction. So that combination we can call as data role. Okay, now data role is nothing but job role plus primary ledger or business unit. When you compare this job role with EBS, this is equal to responsibility plus primary ledger and our operating unit. Okay, and abstract roles. So it's a very simple. So job roles or duty roles or data roles are specific to application, but abstract roles are common roles which are generally used across the application. Those are nothing but employee. Okay, employee role we call as abstract role. So if any user is going to work on the application, for that user it's mandatory you have to assign abstract role. Then only the user will get certain privileges to work on the application. So this role, employee role, we call as a abstract role. These are the four roles we have in the Fusion applications. Because before we get into that application, we should understand these roles so that our job will be very easy to understand and work on the application side. Okay, job roles are equal to menus in EBS. Fusion job roles are equal to EBS menus, and Fusion duty roles are equal to EBS submenus, and Fusion data role is equal to responsibility where we assign primary ledger or operating it. It's equal to that. And fusion point of, if you want to understand what is the data role is equal to job role plus primary ledger and business unit, or just primary ledger or just business unit. Okay, so that's what we have to understand here. Data role, sometimes data role can be duty role plus primary ledger or duty role plus business unit. Sorry, because duty role is equal to submenu. In EBS we can create the responsibility for submenu also, right? The same way here also data role can be created for data job role or for duty role also, and abstract role is equal to employee. Okay, these are the roles we have. And sorry, fine. Out of these four roles, so job roles are seeded, duty roles are seeded, abstract roles are seeded, data roles are created by system whenever you create the primary ledger or business unit. I'm very sorry for this. Okay, so we have four roles: job, duty, data, and abstract. Okay, these three are seeded. Data roles will be created by system whenever you create the primary ledger or operating unit. So those data roles only finally will be assigning to the user to give access to any future to work on set of data that is related to specific primary ledger or business unit. Finally, what we do, we'll assign data role to user. This task is equal to, we assign responsibility to user in EBS. Okay, in Fusion we'll assign the data roles to user. In EBS what we do, we assign the responsibility to user. Just when you say we assign the responsibility to user, we should understand already primary ledger and operating units are assigned to this responsibility in case of EBS. Here when you say data role we are assigning, so within the data role we have a job role plus primary ledger or job role plus business unit. That depends on which data role we are talking about. If any questions on this RBAC, role-based access control, whatever we discussed, these comparisons, or any understanding anybody is expecting, or any doubts or clarification required, you can ask me now. Sorry. Any questions on this? Sir, and what do you mean by security provided? This is what security. For the user, I am just going to provide access to specific data role, means specific business unit, or specific primary ledger, or specific futures. From SBU to SBU. What do you mean by SBU, SBU? In EBS, we have a security profile. Okay. Fine. Security profile we have, okay, which we can create, or else automatically system will create the security profile for each business business group. Yeah. Here, okay, in EBS case, what we are doing is we are assigning the primary ledger or operating unit to responsibility by using the profile options. But in case of Fusion, you no need to use any profile options. Okay, you no need to use any profile options. If you create the primary ledger automatically the primary ledger will be mapped with respect to job roles. If you create the business unit in Fusion environment, automatically the business group, business unit will be mapped with the relevant job roles, whatever we have for subledger applications. And so apart from that, the data role only you can treat as a security. Okay. Apart from that, if you want to create your own security profile, yes, we can create it. We'll be working on that in these sessions. Okay, we'll do that. But basically, you no need to assign your primary ledger or business unit to any one of the roles. Automatically system will assign. Here the usage of profile option is maximum reduced. When you are working on Fusion financial applications, you may not set minimum one profile option to complete your financials configuration. Without using the profile option, you'll be able to complete all the setups. You can provide all the privileges to the user to start working on the system environment to enter the live data. Okay, that's how they're given. In further sessions, we'll be seeing all those points. Sorry. So this is all about these roles. Any questions here? Sorry, I'm just very sorry. I just have some cold here today. Fine. Any questions on this concept?
Lakshman,
Yeah.
yeah, is there any means why they are changing the naming convention submenus to job role, duty role? Any specific reason?
They are going more the naming convention, which will be more close and close to the business terms. See, so somebody need access to payables. If I say, okay, if I speak as a consultant, if I speak, use AP Navigate GUI, that may be some technical term for the guys who are working in the business, right? If I say,
Correct.
if you need full access to payables, you can assign to payables manager. You can give the privilege, you can assign the role called as payables manager. Being a functional consultant, if you and me are speaking in this way, the business user also can understand, right? They're more just bringing into the terminology which is very close or which is a part of business. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's how they're given. Okay.
Oh,
Eh,
thank you.
yeah, fine. Any other questions? Fine. If no questions, we'll jump into other concept. Yeah. So user management. Okay. The next topic is user management. We'll talk about user management. Okay. So what are the concept we will be discussing in these sessions? Everything we'll be comparing with EBS and we'll be discussing. Not only these initial sessions, but further complete entire course will be running in that way. Okay. So when we talk about user management, means how users can be managed. User management means I'm not going to talk about user management application, okay, which we have in EBS. Okay. So in Fusion, how users can be managed. So basically users in EBS case from where we can create the users. Users we can create from system administrator. So user can be created from system administrator and employee. Okay, simple. Let me take here point here. User we can create from system administrator and employee can be created from HRMS. And say we created a user from system administrator, then we created employee from HRMS. Finally, what we do is if that employee is going to work in the system environment as a application user, we'll assign employee to user. Done. Okay, this is how we are managing. Finally, we'll assign responsibilities to that user. So this is how we are doing. We are creating the user from system administrator, employee from HRMS, and we are assigning the employee to user. A user create whatever the user created in system administrator, and finally we are assigning the responsibilities to user. This is how we are managing. But when you talk about here, we have only one option: user. From where we can create means from system administrator, from sysadmin. But Fusion, we can create the users from two different applications. So user you can okay user you can create from two applications. One is IDM. Okay, IDM already discussed. Identity manager. For the same we have other name called as OAM, Oracle Identity Manager. From IDM or OAM you can create the user. If not from here, you can create the user from HCM also. HCM stands for Human Capital Management. It's equal to HRMS, HR and other HR related applications. That is HCM product family, where we have suite of HR related solutions. In Fusion applications, we can create user from IDM or OEM, and other option is available as HCM. So generally, what is the user we create from IDM or OEM? That user we call as implementation user. And HCM, from HCM side, if you are creating user, that user you can call as employee user. Okay, so users can be created from two different applications. One is IDM, second one is HCM. If you are creating the user from IDM, that user you can call it as implementation user, and from HCM, whatever the user you create, that user you can call as employee user. So what is the difference between these two users? If you create the user if you create the user from IDM, if you create the user from IDM, say from IDM I'm creating the user called as ABC. I created user ABC from IDM. Now I cannot assign employee to this user. If you create the user from IDM, we cannot assign the employee to this user. In case of EBS, if you create the user from system administrator, yes, you can assign the employee to that user. Now equal to system administrator, okay, in EBS we have system administrator. Equal to that in the Fusion we have IDM. But in EBS, if you create the user from system administrator, you can assign the employee to the user. But in the Fusion environment, if you create the user from IDM, you cannot assign the employee to user. But how to assign the employee to user? So there is no separate task to perform in the Fusion environment where we can assign the employee to the user. Okay, if any employee require any user, for that employee you can create from HCM. If you are creating the user from HCM, that employee user is equal to user plus employee. That's it. That means, say you need one user, that to that user you have to assign the employee. If this is the requirement, what we have to do is straight away you have to go and create from HCM. If you are creating the user from HCM, first what you have to do, you have to create the employee. For that employee, which user credentials, which user required, which user login information is required, that you have to provide. That's how you have to create. Okay, so but if you are going to create the user from IDM, just you are going to create the user, you cannot map any employee with that user. Okay, that's how it will work in this environment. But if when we are just if you want to create the user from HCM, your legal entity and your business unit should be ready, because from HCM side, okay, means if you are creating the employee user, if you are creating the employee user, what we have to do is employee user creation time. You have to specify that employee user is belongs to which legal entity and which business unit. But to create the implementation user in IDM environment, you no need to give any specifications. It's a simple task. However, we do in EBS case. In EBS, simply we go and create the user in the same way. In IDM, you can create the user in similar way. But if you want to create the user from HCM, that is nothing but employee user. In HCM, if you are creating user, it's nothing but you are creating employee and user. And at the time of employee user creation, you have to select legal entity and business unit. That's how it works. And functionality point of view, system environment, behavior point of view, how these things will work. Okay, so say for example, I created IDM user. Okay, IDM user, I'll be assigning all the roles. Okay, I'll be assigning all the required roles to act this user as a implementation consultant. Okay, so that this user, IDM user, can perform all the configurations. If I give access to any applications, for application related transaction process also implementation user can involve. And for HCM user also, I can assign all the roles. HCM user also, if I assign the implementation related roles to HCM user can work in the system environment as a consultant also, based on which roles we are assigning. And if I give access to specific application transaction process, this HCM user also can perform transaction in the system. That means IDM user or HCM user can do the system configuration based on the roles which we assign to the user, and IDM user and HCM user can perform the business transactions in the system environment. So finance point of view, what is the difference between IDM and HCM user? It's very simple. With IDM user, even you have a permissions, you cannot create the supplier site. Okay, seems to there is some network issue. Just 1 second. Just give me one moment, please. Seems to there is some network issue. Okay. Yeah, done. I'm sorry, like there was some network issue. Okay, hope now you can hear me. Fine, done. So simple point here. Okay. Yeah, thanks. Okay. The simple point here is if you create the user from IDM or HCM, what is the difference? So when you have a user, okay, when you create a user, okay, when you create a user from IDM or HCM, you can assign the required roles to act as an implementation consultant, and any user can perform in system related configuration and do respect to application related transaction process. If you want to understand the difference between IDM user and HCM user financial point of view, only the difference is if you are working as IDM user, you can perform everything related to financials except supplier site creation. Means being IDM user, you cannot create the supplier site. Only you can create the supplier side if the user is HCM user. That is only the difference we have to understand. Okay, that is only the difference we have to understand. What is the difference between IDM and HCM user? Another point is IDM, if you are creating user, just user. HCM user is nothing but user plus employee. Automatically system will assign the employee to user. That's how system will create in the system environment automatically. That will see when you are creating the same definitions in the system environment. And here by default, when you talk about EBS, we have a sysadmin user, which is seeded user in the fresh environment. Okay, in Fusion environment for application access, we have a seeded user called as FA admin. Okay, FA admin. So this FA admin, FA stands for Fusion Applications, FA admin. So this is the one user we have to have access to the application environment. If you want to have access to IDM, okay, so you have a separate user called as Excel sysadm. Okay, to have with this FA admin, you can have access to applications environment. What exactly applications and all, which environment we'll discuss. And just to have access to IDM, where this IDM is equal to system administrator, equal to system administrator. To have access to that, you can use the user called as Excel sysadm admin for OIM or IDM access. And another point here is, so for IDM, to access IDM, they given separate credentials, but it's not required. If you have access to application, from these applications you can navigate to IDM also. There is separate task. By using the task, you can navigate to IDM from applications by using this user. That means majorly we need this user only. By using this user, you can have access to the application. If you want to work on the application related to system configuration or anything, you can work. And if you want to navigate to IDM to create the new users or any role assignments, we can just use separate task. Within this, we'll be having separate task. By using that, you can navigate to IDM or OEM. Okay, so these are the just simple points to understand when you talk about the seeded users in Fusion application environment. Generally, when we are working, we'll start with the FA admin. Okay, we may not use Excel sysadmin. The reason is, if we don't have access from here, then we'll be using this. But generally, always we'll be having access from here. How to access, how to switch from here to there, that we'll be discussing once we start with the system. Okay, done. Now say for example, we have a user. Okay, now Fusion environment, EBS environment, if you want to start with implementation, okay, what responsibility is required? Okay, if you want to start with the implementation, what responsibility is required? By default, we have a sysadmin user. From sysadmin user, we will be having access to system administrator responsibility. If you have access to system administrator responsibility, you can start with your implementation. You can create the responsibilities, you can just assign the profile options, and you can create the user. You can start creating one by one, and you can start mapping by using the respective profile options, and you can start doing the system module specific setups, and everything you can complete. That means primarily we require responsibility called as system administrator responsibility. Okay, with the help of sorry, with the help of system administrator responsibility, you'll be able to do system configuration. So however, we are depending on some responsibility to do the system configuration, the EBS. In the same way, in Fusion also, if you want to do the application configuration, we require basically two roles, which will provide full privileges in system environment to do any configuration or to create users. So those two roles here in EBS we are calling as responsibility, in Fusion we are calling as role. So in EBS we need system administrator responsibility. In Fusion, if you want to do any configuration in the Fusion environment, we require roles called as application implementation consultant and IT security manager. Okay, if you assign these two roles to any user, from that user you will be able to do all the system related configuration. Okay, these two roles we have to assign to user. These two roles you can assign to IDM user, or you can assign these two roles to HCM user, so that that user will get all the privileges to do the system configuration in the system environment. Okay, so these are the seeded roles we have. Okay, seeded roles we have. So here seeded roles we are discussing, we already discussed four type of roles we have in the Fusion: job role, duty role, data role, and abstract role. Job role means just is the role where we don't assign anything here. Okay, data role means job role plus some assignment. In the same in EBS also, system administrator, in the sense it's we don't assign to system administrator responsibility anything, right? It is just seeded role without assigning any primary ledgers or operating net or any other assignment. Just for configuration purpose we'll be using that. So in the same way, in EBS Fusion case also, we'll be using this application implementation consultant, IT security manager, where these two roles falls under just job roles, because we are not assigning anything to these roles. These roles are seeded, which we can use to do the system configuration. When you say these two roles falls under which role types among these four, in the sense these two roles falls under job roles, just job roles related to configuration related roles. Okay, so if you want to start with implementation, generally what we do is you can use this FA admin user, or else normally what you can do is will create the user. Maybe you may use this user, you can log into the system and you can create your own user with your client name or any specific name, then assign roles. These two roles generally we call as implementation roles. Okay, implement, just say assign roles. First we'll create user, then we'll assign the roles. Which roles means these two roles we can assign. If you assign these two roles to the user, that user can start doing the system related configuration. Okay, so just these are the points we have to understand when you talk about how many type of users we can create. Means one is implementation user, other one is employee user. From where we can create means user, implementation user you can create from IDM, employee user you can create from HCM. And other point here is, when you create the user from HCM, you are creating the user from HCM means literally you are creating employee. For that employee you are providing user name, that's all. Once you create the user from it in HCM, automatically the user will be synchronized with IDM. The user which you are creating, employee user, whatever you are creating in HCM, that user information will be available in IDM. Means automatically it will get synchronized. The password and all everything you can set in IDM only for HCM user also. Here you are creating user, just name you are giving, that will be mapped with employee, that will flow into IDM. In IDM level only you can set the password for that user and you can assign any required roles to that user. From HCM directly you cannot do all those activities, password setup, etc. Okay, so that's what we have to understand. Ultimately we are using IDM only for user management. That's what we have to understand. HCM only just for the definition of employee user creation. Okay, that's all. So just these are the points. Difference, what is the difference between these two? You can start doing the implementation with any user by assigning these two roles. You may proceed with IDM user, or you can go ahead with the HCM user, but you have to assign these two roles to those users so that you will be able to complete all the system configuration. Only the challenge with IDM user is you cannot create the supplier sites. That is a limitation we have. Okay, so if you go with HCM user, you can do all the configuration. You can create the supplier site, and you can perform any kind of business related transactions across the applications. And now, if anybody has any questions on this Fusion user management, how users can be managed, and the differences, some other understanding required, you can ask me the questions.
Lakshman, when you
Yeah.
say a user is created in IDM or OIM,
Yeah.
he cannot do
May I know who is speaking?
he Ramesh here.
Yeah. Ramesh, yes. Okay, could you please reduce the volume from your side? I'm getting a lot of background noise. Then we can have a discussion. That would be good, I guess.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, please.
So my question is,
Yeah.
when we create a user in OIM,
Okay.
identity management, you
Yeah.
said they can do configurations, but they are not allowed to do any transactions.
No. I'm not saying.
Any
I'm sorry. One point here. Let me correct it. I'm not saying they cannot perform the transaction. They can perform the transaction. See here, I'll create the user from IDM. If you don't mind, you can mute before. Again. Yeah, great. So, so if you create the user from IDM, they can do the system related configuration if you assign these roles. Otherwise, you may create the user from IDM, they cannot do anything. Okay, done. So you created a user from IDM and you assign these two roles so that IDM user can record the IDM user can do the system configuration. Okay, done. Now I want to allow the IDM user to work on accounts payables. If I want to allow the IDM user to work on accounts payables, I may assign the role called as payables manager. Here, basically this role I'll be assigning the payables manager, and I want to allow that user to work for India business unit. I'll be assigning one data role to IDM user so that that IDM user, now the IDM user can involve in the transaction process. IDM user can record the payables related transaction since I assigned payables related data role. Okay, that is a point. The same possible with HCM user. But what is not possible with IDM user means I may give the privileges to IDM user to work on the payables, but unfortunately that IDM user cannot create the supplier side. Apart from that, all the activities can be performed by IDM user. Now you can continue with your questions.
So can he perform? Is that the same for customers and customer sites too,
No,
or is
no.
it just the suppliers?
Just supplier. For entire financials, only suppliers, not with the customer sites.
That looks weird to me.
Yeah, that's how we have. Okay. There is some reason also. There is some reason. Once we get into the application, I'll explain you. Just don't mind, I'm muting you. Just we'll talk. Okay. So because otherwise I'm getting some noise. After asking the questions, you can mute yourself. We'll be discussing again. If you have some question, you can unmute and you can ask me. See here, why IDM user or OM user cannot create the supplier site? Because in the system environment, if anybody has to create the supplier site, supplier site means it is that will be mapped with the business unit. If anybody needs to create the supplier site, that user need to be classified as a buyer. Okay, the user need to be classified as a buyer. The buyer only in the Fusion environment we are calling as procurement agent. Okay, and the user can be user. If you want to create the supplier from any supplier site from any user, that user need to be classified as a procurement agent. You can classify any user as a procurement agent if the user is created from HCM. That means HCM user can be classified as a procurement agent. Okay, that procurement agent will have privileges to create the supplier sites. If you create the user from IDM user cannot be converted, classified as a procurement agent because there is no employee association with IDM. Okay, IDM user. Okay, that is the reason IDM user cannot be classified as a procurement agent since IDM user is not employee. HCM user can be classified as a procurement agent since HCM user is already employee. So that is the reason system will allow you to create the supplier sites from HCM user only. That is the actual background to understand. I thought to discuss this point when we start working on the system, but since there is question, we are talking about it. Any other questions, please?
Yeah, Lakshman,
Yeah.
when you talk about in R12 or 11i,
Yep.
we'll create the user and we assign the means employee can an user or can assign the employee to that particular ID.
Correct.
You mean to say in Fusion implementation user is not employee, not at all employee.
Yes, implementation user is not at all employee. You cannot make him as an employee user also. You cannot assign, you cannot associate any employee with implementation user.
Why that differentiation? No, that people who are working in the organization, they can perform the implementation, right? So
They can perform. In that case, if they are employee, you should create them as a HCM only.
No, why
See,
they are differentiated? That means is there it should not be employee in implementation user.
see why they simplified in the sense, in EBS case, we'll create a user and we'll be assigning the employee. Okay, that task they simplified by differentiating these two. So if you want to create a user, okay, where you are that user is not going to involve in some kind of, the employee user is not required any employee association. Maybe you are going to work as a consultant. You, for that reason, you no need any employee association. So for that reason, you can create the user from IDM, and the people who are working in the company, who are working on the application, for them you just simply you can create the user from HCM itself. So in that case, you no need to separately perform the activity called as employee assignment to the user. If you have a please
Can perform only in terms in R12 or 11i only setups kind of thing in implementation user?
Setups and process also. Implementation user is allowed to do the setups and process also. Only restriction is supplier sites you cannot create from implementation user. When you are creating the supplier site, we know very well, when we are working in ongoing business process, who will be creating the supplier sites? The business user.
Correct.
Who is the business user? Some buyer who will be having the buyer role. Okay, that's what. But when we are working as implementation consultant, how we'll be handling? Initially, we'll start with our implementation as a implementation user only. Once we are ready with business unit and legal entity, then you'll be able to create the employee user. Okay, you can create employee user. Okay, and then you can start doing the system configuration. And then in that case, system will allow you to create the supplier sites through manual process. Anyway, we'll be loading all these activities. So that's how it works. Any questions on this? Fine. If no questions, we can continue to the next point. Okay, done. So this is how just we have to understand when we talk about users. Okay, any questions you can ask me here, or else we'll switch to other concept called as functional setup manager. I'm sorry. Okay, done. The third next. Yeah, please.
Yeah, Lakshman, these two roles that we are assigning to the IDM users, like application implementation consultant and IT security manager.
Yep.
So are these classified as job roles or duty roles?
The same point just before we discuss job roles.
Job roles. Okay.
Why we are calling as job roles? Why we are calling as job roles? What is job role and what is the duty role? If you assign any primary ledger or business unit to any role, that immediately will call as data role. To which role we don't assign anything, that simply you can call as job role.
So which means we can even assign job roles to the user, right?
Job roles, yes, we can assign.
It cannot be data role always.
Yeah, job roles we can assign to perform some common task which is not specific to anything. That's it.
Okay.
See, a simple point. System administrator will assign to the user, right? From system administrator, you can do all the setups. System administrator cannot have any access to any primary ledger, any operating unit in EBS, right?
Yeah.
Yes. In the same way, this application implementation consultant role, IT security manager role is equal to system administrator. But why we have two here? basically application implementation consultant role is enough to do the system configuration. If you assign IT security manager, say simple example I'll take here. I'll create the user called as XYG. I'll create the user called as XYG. I may create this from anywhere, IDM or HCM. I created. For this XYG user, I will assign the role called as application implementation consultant. Okay, I created this user, I assigned this role to this. Now by using XYG user, I'll be able to do all the system configuration. But why we are assigning IT security manager? So from XYZ user, if I want to create the new user, I cannot go and create new user until unless this XYZ user have access to role called as IT security manager. Basically, IT security manager has a provision to create the users in IDM. That is the reason, along with XYZ, along with application implementation consultant, always will be assigning the IT security manager, which will give the privileges to create the new users also from our user. That's it. Any question here?
No, it's clear. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Fine, that. Okay, that's all about user. Now we'll talk about the functional setup manager. Here already just we taking the point here for discussion. So we'll talk about functional setup manager. Setup manager. FSM. So the functional setup manager, we simply call it as FSM. So similar to this, we have a simple feature in EBS also. So in EBS, okay, in EBS we have a concept called as, in R12, not in 11i, in R12 we have a concept called as, okay, accounting setup manager, ASM. Here FSM, there ASM. Okay, what is the use of ASM? In GL we have ASM, accounting setup manager. With accounting setup manager we can complete certain setups. With accounting setup manager you can create the primary ledger creation, reporting ledger, secondary ledger, and legal entity creation, assignments, BSV assignments to legal entities, and there are some other setups also which can be done, which are specific to ledger related setups. You can do as a sequencing related setups or intercompany related setups, or some other. Even in the same environment we have an interface to connect with HRMS to create the operating units and business groups, etc. All we have a privileges. From here you can connect to subledgers, and there are a lot of connectivity we have from ASM, accounting setup manager, but that is limited. You can do some limited setups from ASM, but not all setups. If I want to do some setups for payables, yes, I cannot do from here. If I want to do some setups for receivables, I cannot do. Only for limited functions, you can do the setups from ASM, which is part of R12 version. Okay, but similar to ASM, we have a FSM, functional setup manager. So ASM is limited to do certain setups, but function setup manager will allow you to do any application related configuration. So in Fusion environment, what Oracle it is, in EBS what happens is, if you assign the rest, or if you have a payable super user role, where we'll be just selecting the menu called as AP Navigate GUI 1.2, or some custom whatever you create. Once you select it, from that responsibility, being a consultant or super user, you can do the system configuration from the same responsibility. Once you're done with the setups, you'll be having some access to create the transactions, invoice, and the payments, because that role, the role AP Navigate GUI consists of, okay, setup related tasks as well as transaction related tasks. But in the Fusion, that they just separated. If you have access to functional setup manager, simple. If application implementation consultant role is assigned to your user, you will be allowed to have access to functional setup manager. Okay, the application implementation consultant role will allow you to access functional setup manager. So once you have access to functional setup manager, you can start doing the configuration for any application. Just you will be having access to setup part. You cannot have any access to, with the help of application implementation consultant, you cannot have any access to transaction related process. Okay, only setup part. So once you have access to functional setup manager, what activities we have to do, from where we have to start. So in EBS, okay, here we have to understand some terminology when you work when we are going to work on functional setup manager, FSM. So in the FSM, the naming convention, say here, before we talk about, say we have application product families called as Oracle Financials, right? Oracle, it can be any, just Fusion or anything, and say Oracle SCM, Oracle projects, or you may call it as PPM, project portfolio management, or Oracle project accounting, whatever, and Oracle CRM. Okay, these generally we call as, these are the different suits. Okay, this generally we call as, these are the different suits or different product families. But as per function setup manager, the naming convention for these group of applications is offering. Oracle Financials, as for functional setup manager in Fusion, we call as offering. Oracle SCM is another offering. You may understand this is one of the offering from Oracle, or also you may understand, you can understand it as this offers respective solutions. Now these all we call as offerings. So Oracle Financials, as for Fusion, we are calling as offering. So you may just, when we are going to do the implementation for a client, you may just implement two offerings called as Financials and SCM offering. Okay, done. We are calling financial as an offering. So within the financial, we have a different modules, right? When I talk about financials, we have, say, just simple, I'm taking some few modules: GL, AP, AR, or some other applications, CMF, etc. We have, I'm not taking all. So financials we are calling as offering, SCM we are calling as offering. If you take financially offering, within the financial offering, what are the applications we have? GL, AP, AR. So these applications, the terminology they're given as options. Option. GL is one option within the financials offering. AP is another option. The module here, terminology, naming convention, they're given as option. Okay, it's very simple. Here we have offerings and options. When we are going to do the implementation for any client, we should understand what is the scope of offerings, and within the scope of offerings, what are the options we have to implement for the client. This is what we have to understand. Once you are very sure, if you are going, when you are doing the implementation, once you are very sure which options and which offerings and which options you have to implement for the client, based on that selection of offering and options, you have to create the implementation project. Okay, when we are going to work in the Fusion environment, what we have to do is, first we have to create implementation project. Create implementation project. How to create the implementation project in the Fusion applications? So by selecting offerings, required offerings, and by opting respective options from the respective offering. So we have to create the implementation project. Without creating the implementation project, you cannot do anything in the Fusion environment. Okay, so to create, while you are creating the implementation project, you have to select, say client, we are going to implement financials and SCM. So the process of implementation project creation in the system, first we'll be selecting financial offering and financial offering. Within the financial offering, whether you are going to implement all options or selected options, will be selecting. Then we'll be selecting SCM offering. Within the SCM offering, which options you are going to implement for the client, those will be selecting. That's how we have to create implementation project. Okay, for creating the implementation project. So let me take simple example here. If you want to create the primary ledger in EBS environment, what we have to do? First, we have to create the calendar. Then you have to enable the currency, and you have to create the chart of accounts. Then you can go and create the primary ledger. You can give the name. You can select whatever the calendar you created, you can select. Whatever the currency you enabled, you can select. Whatever the chart of accounts you defined, and you can select the accounting method, the customized or seeded. So that means if you enable the currency, then only you can find at the time of primary ledger creation. In the same way, when we are going to create implementation project, what we are doing is we are selecting offerings, and within the offering we are selecting respective options. So at the time of implementation project, if you want to select offerings into your project, offerings and options into your project, it's a mandatory you have to enable the offerings in the system. In EBS we'll be having all the seeded currencies, right? So we have to enable, then only you can select for the primary ledger creation. In the same way, in the Fusion environment, in the fresh environment, all offerings will be available, but all will be in disabled mode. So there may be 20-30 offerings which are from Oracle, but for which offerings will take the license, will have some subscription from Oracle, those offerings we have to enable. First task once you start with the Fusion implementation is you have to enable the offerings, and within the offerings options. How you can enable, what base you will be enabling offerings and options? Based on scope of the implementation project. Based on scope of implementation project, first task we have to do is we have to enable the offerings and options. Once offerings and options are enabled offerings and options will be available to select at the time of implementation project. However, enabled currencies only will be available at the time of primary ledger to select. Okay, enabled currency only will be available at the time of primary ledger creation to select respective currency. In the same way, enabled offerings and options will be available to select into project when you are creating the project. Okay, done. We'll be creating the implementation project. After creating the implementation project, okay, you can assign implementation project to project manager or someone. The same way, so once you create the implementation project, say you selected financials and SCM. I say I created implementation project by selecting financials and SCM offerings and all the options within that. Now we created a project. The project you can assign to project manager or somebody, and within the project which offerings we have? Two offerings, finance and SCM. Now each offering you can assign to respective team member. I'll assign this finance offering to consultant A and SCM to consultant B. And once these consultants will start working on the finance and SCM, accordingly they can set the they can update the status, whether the task is started by consultant or not, the offering work is completed or not, how many tasks are completed from the respective offering. Okay, so we can do that. See here, simple. One more point let me add here. We'll create the implementation project. Once you create the implementation project, okay, while you are creating the implementation project only, you can assign that project to someone. I'm just taking it as a project manager. Once you create the implementation project, system will create the task list. System creates task list. Okay, with the help of task list only you can do the setups. Simple point. In the implementation project, you selected offering called as financials and option called as payables, AP. You selected offering called as financials, option called as AP. So system will create the task list, okay, to complete the payable setups. To complete the payable setups, what task we have to perform? Say as per EBS, financial options, payable options, payment terms, distribution sets, right, and bank accounts creation. All these tasks we have to perform. So those tasks only system will create as a task list. So which option you selected to complete that option, that module related setups, which task you require, those all system will create a task list. Now what we can do is we can assign particular offering to particular resource, or within the offering specific option you can assign to specific resource, or else within the option Specific task you can assign to respective team member, as that is their responsibility to complete. Then once the resource start working on the project, they can keep updating the status as the work started and completed, and in work, just whatever the progress of the work they can update, so that there will be opportunity for the project manager or who is monitoring the project to capture, to track the status of the entire project status. So out of entire, to complete this implementation project, how many tasks are there, how much percentage of tasks are completed, and how many tasks are in progress, how many tasks are in completed, how many tasks are not yet started. So this certain kind of statuses easily manager or somebody will be able to track, and they can monitor and they can control the project related activities. So in generally in R12, when you are working within the instance environment, we don't have that future where manager somebody can just create the project, they can track, and online the status can be updated against the project by resource or project manager. That is not possible, but in the fusion it is possible. In EBS case, what will be do what project team will be doing, this kind of information they can be maintained in some third party tools or some separate documentation. But here the real time, the live updates you can be captured, can be tracked at project level. Okay, so this kind of simple basic level of project management related function also we have in the application. Without, first we have to create the project. Once you create, project creation is done, then you can start working on the system configuration. So basically this is what we can do in the functional setup manager. In the functional setup manager, what we'll be doing, we'll be enabling the required offerings. Based on that, we'll be creating the project. The project can be assigned to project manager or somebody, and based on the selected offerings, automatically system will create the task list. Task list will allow us to do the system configuration. Specific task or group of tasks can be assigned to team members, or else you can assign specific offering or specific option to respective team member. Once they start working on that, they can update the status, that can be tracked as a project status. And apart from that, from here only you can there is a concept called as rapid implementation, as we just discussed yesterday as a simple point, where from here only functional setup manager only you can download the rapid implementation templates, you can fill the data and you can load into this functional setup manager only. Okay, these are the kind of even you can generate the reports related to setups which we did in this environment functional setup manager. So to just complete solution of system configuration, we'll be using the functional setup manager. That is a simple point to just summarize this. Any questions on this, you can ask me. Okay, fine. So this is all about the function setup manager. In next session, we'll start with the system. Okay, in the next session we'll see how to create the user, how to create the project, how to assign this roles to the users, etc. What are the sequence of activities we have to perform. We'll just run through in the next session. The next session will be on Monday, because we'll be having sessions from Monday to Friday. So this week we're done with that. So next week we will start this system related configuration, and from Monday onwards I'll be taking the 2 hour session. Yesterday and today, because just it's initial sessions, we started a bit late and we are just winded up a bit early also, not 2 hours we take it. So from Monday I'll be starting the sessions sharp 7 o'clock, we'll be running up to 9 o'clock. So this would be the schedule which will be followed. Anybody has any questions on this today's session, you can ask me, or else if you have any specific questions related to this course or anything, you can ask me. I'm sorry, today my just voice is not clear and may not be much audible, no clarity for the people. I have suffering some cold and all, so I'm sorry for that. I'll make sure that everything will set okay from Monday. So any questions on this session, or any questions related to this course or anything, you can ask me. And I request you all, the people who wants to continue with this training, to just complete the formalities. Okay, we'll be sending the mail across all the attendees who are just in the class today. Okay, fine. So if no questions, we can wind up the session. Let me wait for some time. Monday is festival, right? So correct, but see, this is online. We are not traveling here and there, just spending 2 hours from home. It won't become big challenge. Okay, we'll have a session. If somebody is going to miss any, we'll be sending the recorded session. Right. So because just will be already immediate to this today's session, we have two days gap, right? Again, third day, Monday also means again it will be delay. We cannot complete within this month. Okay, the actual plan is we'll be completing the course by end of this month. Okay, Monday we have session. Okay, any questions? Fine. Seems to no questions. Okay, thanks for joining this session. Okay, I'll see you on Monday. Have a good day and good night. Thank you all.